Day 13. God is not looking for a hero. He is the hero. And because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king granted my request. Nehemiah 2:8. Being a hero is about the shortest-lived profession on earth. Will Rogers. If you want to see what God thinks of money, just look at all the people he gave it to. Dorothy Parker. When we get our arms around this truth, we can better understand and accept the absolute awesome adventure he has set out before us. You see, he is not waiting for us to come into our own and become the hero of the world. That would make us and our decisions, accomplishments, and our lives the center of the universe. He is the center of the universe, and he beckons us to come follow him and join him for the only soul-satisfying adventure on the planet. This is not bad news for us. It is incredible, liberating news, because we know deep down inside that we do not have all the answers and ability, and we really don't always have the best motives, since we are still human. We can also be vulnerable if given the right situation. God makes an astounding offer to follow him and let him use our gifts and talents, the things we enjoy, and the way we're wired. We will make a powerful combination from all that, which will be used to touch people's lives with the truth of his love. You see, most people treat God like meeting the pastor at the mall. A cordial, "Hello, pastor, nice to see you. How are you doing? Nice sermon the other day." Although we don't really remember it all that much. That's the respect we show. In Jesus' day, we would have shown similar respect for the person by calling him master. The English word is translated from the Greek word epistat, which means any sort of superintendent or overseer. Much like us, when the professional fisherman of Jesus' day, Simon Peter, was asked by Jesus Christ to use his fishing boat as a makeshift stage to speak to the crowd of people on the shore, he obliged the rabbi. After all, people were watching, and he didn't want to insult anyone. It could be bad for business. But when the rabbi said, "Let's fish," our Peter must have thought, "This guy ought to stick with his knitting. Pastor, you do the preaching and I'll do the fishing. And if you ever want to know anything about what I do, go ahead and ask. I'll give you quite an education." But being the professional fisherman, Peter said, "Master, we have worked hard all night and haven't caught anything." At this point, there was probably a pregnant pause before he obliged the pastor and said, "But because you say so, I'll let down the nets." I can certainly relate to Peter here. Have you ever had some incredible person tell you to do something you knew didn't make sense, but you did it anyway and you were right? There are many who give unsolicited advice, the proverbial 2 cents worth, and often we're expected to take heed, only to prove them wrong. Sometimes it is at our expense. This has scared us from both listening to wise counsel and, more critically, following God. Fortunately, our fisherman chose the right path. As soon as he obeyed this pastor, he caught such a large amount of fish, his nets began to break. Then he signaled for his buddies, and they all caught so many fish that the boats began to sink. You understand that the reason they caught that many fish was only because Peter obeyed? It wasn't because Peter was the hero. No, he was now part of massive life change, including his own. As soon as the seasoned, salty dog fisherman, who had seen it all, saw something so outrageous, so beyond his wildest dreams, so miraculous, he was moved. His heart got it. It wasn't about Peter. It was about the God of the galaxy, who was speaking and standing next to a rugged man's man, a real man, who fished all night sometimes, who smelt like smelt, who probably had a net-mending kit in his pocket and a permanent tan. This man was now in the company of the Son of God. When Peter saw this happening, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinful man." Then the Savior of the world spoke these words to him. "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Your Father spoke these words a long time ago to you and me also. Nehemiah must have thought, who am I? I'm essentially a prisoner here in the palace. Granted, a very highly compensated one at that, and I can come and go as I like, but I can't be the person who leads an entire nation back to their historic city and rebuild it too. God, I am not that hero. God's response was, as he spoke to Peter that day on the fishing boat, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. From now on, you will catch men. Only at this point does a real man stand or fall. You see, all the miracles, all the evidence of a Savior, all of the trials he brings you through culminate in this defining moment. Peter was smitten by someone who was able to pierce his soul with his eyes. He could not look at him and asked him to go, to leave, by saying, I am not worthy. This time he wasn't just hearing the words of the pastor. No, this time he heard the words of the one who breathed life into the nostrils of Adam and everyone born since then. When the world's greatest treasure asked you to follow him, and you have seen his power filter through his love, you cannot respond in any other way. Peter pulled his boat to shore, left his fishing tackle, nets, bait, poles, gaffs, life jackets, and followed him. Nehemiah did likewise. Almost 500 years earlier, he left the comfort of the palace to do something I am sure he wondered how he was going to pull it off. But he knew he could trust the one who had led him to this defining moment in life. You are at a similar crossroad. You can either stay safe, comfortable, and longing for more, or you can trust God, our hero, and follow him for the most satisfying adventure ever. You may be asking the question, well, what does this have to do with my finances? The answer? Everything. Unless you understand the basic truths of ownership, how can you do as Nehemiah or Peter or many others have done and leave the comforts of the mediocre for a truly satisfying life? Until you have the penetrating experience of God speaking to your heart, you will continue to think of God as merely a superintendent and not your absolutely infallible, loving to death God. You are going to be stalled right where you are until that moment. Why not today choose to follow him?